Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar officially separated. For more than 4 decades, the names Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar have been virtually inseparable from the very concept of the ultra-large, devoutly Christian family in American popular culture. They rose to prominence through their long-running TLC reality show 19 Kids and Counting, presenting to millions of viewers a carefully constructed and meticulously maintained image of unwavering unity, deep faith, and a household governed by strict, shared principles that seemed almost antiquated in the modern world. Jim Bob, the gregarious and ambitious patriarch, and Michelle, the soft-spoken but equally committed matriarch, were the towering figures at the head of a sprawling family dynasty that captivated audiences and spawned countless imitators. Their lives were documented in exhaustive detail, from the birth of each child to their daily routines of homeschooling and religious observance. The foundational narrative of their public identity was their partnership, a partnership they claimed was ordained by God, built on a shared conversion experience in their youth, and sustained by a mutual commitment to their conservative Christian faith. They frequently spoke of their decision to leave the number of their children entirely up to God, a choice that would ultimately lead them to have 19 children and become the most famous large family in the world. This was the story they told the world, a story of a couple who, against all modern odds, had built an empire on unity, belief, and the unshakable conviction that they were following a divine plan. Their 1984 wedding, a frugal affair where Michelle wore Jim Bob's mother's wedding dress and personally baked her own wedding cake, became a foundational myth of their shared journey, a symbol of their humble beginnings and their shared commitment to a life of faith and family. However, the carefully stitched seams of this constructed narrative have been visibly fraying for years, and recent events now suggest a profound and potentially permanent rupture that goes far beyond mere marital discord. The news that Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar have officially separated is not just another headline in a long and sordid list of family scandals. It represents the final unraveling thread of the very fabric that held their public and private lives together, signaling the end of an era and the collapse of a carefully maintained illusion that had been decades in the making. To truly grasp the immense magnitude and profound significance of this separation, one must first appreciate the sheer weight and unyielding nature of their public covenant. From the very moment they first stepped into the national spotlight in the early 2000s, Jim Bob and Michelle presented themselves to the world as a singular, indivisible unit, a seamless partnership that functioned as a single entity. They were not merely husband and wife in the traditional sense, they were co-CEOs of a burgeoning family brand, co-authors of a highly influential lifestyle and parenting philosophy, and co-leaders of a movement that sought to promote their particular brand of conservative evangelical Christianity to a mass audience. They were the ultimate power couple in a world that rarely saw such partnerships, and their synergy was a key part of their appeal. Their courtship, which they described with characteristic idealism as beginning with a 4-hour Bible discussion after a high school banquet, became the very blueprint for their own children's relationships and was used as a model for countless young couples within their church community. Their marriage was presented not as a mere human institution but as a sacred testament to their faith, a living example that other families should aspire to emulate. For many years, this carefully crafted narrative held firm against the pressures of the outside world. They weathered numerous storms that would have easily sunk other families and television personalities, consistently presenting a united front in the face of immense public scrutiny and criticism. It was precisely this carefully maintained image of an indestructible, divinely ordained partnership that made their reality show so compelling to viewers. It was the ongoing story of a fortress that could not be breached, a family that stood together against all odds. The 2023 Amazon Prime docuseries, Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets, served as a powerful and devastating counter-narrative, publicly exposing the long-hidden cracks in that fortress to a new generation of viewers and revealing the immense pain and dysfunction that had always lurked beneath the surface of the carefully curated happy image. The separation of Jim Bob and Michelle now powerfully suggests that the fortress has finally and irrevocably fallen, leaving behind only the rubble of what was once a seemingly unshakable institution. The deep and irreparable fractures in their marriage have been methodically exposed by a series of increasingly devastating public crises that struck the family like relentless waves, chief among them being the catastrophic legal troubles of their eldest son, Josh. When the news of Josh's past molestation of 5 underage girls, including several of his own sisters and a babysitter, first broke to the public, it shattered the family's carefully constructed wholesome image into a million pieces, leaving millions of fans shocked and disillusioned. The revelation was a profound betrayal of the values the family claimed to uphold. Later, the situation escalated to an unimaginable level when Josh was arrested and subsequently convicted on federal charges of receiving and possessing child pornography, a crime that would ultimately send him to prison for over a decade. This was a blow, and framing the entire ordeal as a test of their faith, a trial from God that they would face together as a united couple. They consistently presented a front of solidarity and mutual support, refusing to publicly show any cracks in their relationship. Yet, it was in the complex and painful aftermath of this chaos that the underlying tensions between them and within the family as a whole began to surface with increasing intensity. The most significant rift was not with the outside world or even with the media, but tragically within their own immediate family. Their daughter Jill and her husband, Derick Dillard, began to speak out publicly, offering a starkly different and deeply critical perspective on life inside the Duggar household. Derick made shocking and unprecedented allegations against Jim Bob, specifically claiming that he had humiliated and threatened Jill when the couple made the difficult decision to refuse to be on the family's reality show any longer. The Dillards have been remarkably vocal about their painful and ongoing estrangement from Jim Bob, citing issues of control, financial disputes, and what they described as a broken relationship that seemed beyond repair. This was not merely a simple family disagreement or a minor squabble. It was a direct and public challenge to the very foundations of patriarchy and absolute control that Jim Bob represented and had so carefully cultivated over the decades. This painful internal family war cast a long and dark shadow over Jim Bob and Michelle's own relationship, presenting a deeply personal conflict that seemed impossible to resolve without causing irreparable damage to their partnership. Couples' very identities, both public and private, are inextricably intertwined with being the unquestioned heads of a unified clan, a family that presented itself as a model of harmony and obedience. A child's public rebellion, especially one as damning and detailed as Jill and Derick's, is a direct and devastating indictment of the parents' leadership, their values, and their parenting methods. How could Jim Bob, the man who famously used a 50-page questionnaire to vet his daughter's suitors and maintain strict control over their courtships, and Michelle, the mother who frequently spoke of their children as God's greatest blessings and a testament to their faith, possibly weather such a direct and public rebuke from one of their own children? It is precisely within this deeply painful and contentious context that the separation of Jim Bob and Michelle makes a tragic kind of sense. Powerful us against the world mentality that had sustained their marriage for so many years works remarkably well against external threats, uniting them against common enemies and critics. But when the perceived threat is from within the family and a beloved child is pitted against a parent, the very alignment of the partnership becomes fundamentally impossible. If Jim Bob and Michelle could not agree on how to handle the deeply sensitive situation with Jill, or if the entire painful ordeal exposed deep-seated and irreconcilable differences in their core values, their parenting philosophies, and their approach to conflict, then the primary and most important pillar of their marriage, their carefully constructed and presented unified public image, began to crumble from the inside out, leaving the foundation unstable and ultimately unsustainable. Furthermore, the mounting legal troubles of another of their sons, Josh Duggar, and his wife Kendra, have piled an almost unbearable amount of additional pressure onto the already strained family. In early 2026, Joseph and Kendra were charged with child endangerment and false imprisonment in Arkansas, accusations that shocked their followers and added yet another layer of scandal to the Duggar name. The situation became even more dire when Joseph separately faced child sex abuse charges in Florida for allegedly molesting a 9-year-old girl in 2020, accusations that threatened to destroy his own family and further tarnish the Duggar legacy. These serious charges, which resulted in the parents issuing a heartbroken public statement expressing their devastation, added another layer of overwhelming scandal to the Duggar name and forced the family to once again defend themselves against horrific allegations. These repeated legal crises, each one more shocking and damaging than the last, would test the strength of any marriage, even the strongest and most committed. For Jim Bob and Michelle, who had already been through so much, they seemed to have become an unmanageable and crushing burden that they could no longer carry together. The constant, exhausting need to defend the family name to the public, to carefully and strategically manage the ever-shifting narrative, and to navigate the complex legal and emotional fallout of their adult children's increasingly troubling actions must have created an immense and unrelenting strain on their relationship. Private, difficult conversations that Jim, Bob, and Michelle must have had behind closed doors during these relentless crises likely involved painful, deeply personal disagreements about how to proceed. One can only imagine the intense debates over how to appropriately support Joseph, how to treat his wife and children in the aftermath of such accusations, and how to respond to a public that was growing increasingly hostile and judgmental. Faced with the horrifying prospect of yet another family member embroiled in a sexual abuse scandal, the very foundation of the family they had worked so tirelessly and meticulously to build began to feel less like an impenetrable fortress and more like a fragile house of cards, precariously balanced and ready to collapse completely under the weight of the very next revelation. After so many years of forced public unity and carefully managed appearances, the private toll on their relationship finally became too great to bear, leaving them with nothing left but the difficult, painful, and devastating reality of their official separation. The resounding silence from the Duggar camp on this profoundly significant matter is deafening, marking a stark and unmistakable contrast to the years of meticulously controlled media appearances, carefully crafted blog posts, and strategic public statements. This silence signifies an end to the performance, a quiet and somber acknowledgement that the script they wrote for themselves and lived by for so many decades has finally come to a close, leaving behind a story that is far more complicated, tragic, and human than the carefully curated tale of perfection they once told the world. The separation of Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar is not just the end of a marriage, it is the symbolic end of an era in reality television and a powerful testament to the devastating consequences of maintaining a public facade while private. Realities crumble beyond repair. The separation of Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar sends shockwaves far beyond the confines of their own home, rippling through their extensive family network and challenging the very core of the belief system they have spent decades promoting. For the 19 children who grew up under the strict rules and expectations of the Duggar household, this development represents a profound disruption of their foundational understanding of marriage and family. The Duggar children were raised with a very specific theology regarding marriage, that it is a sacred, lifelong covenant before God that should never be broken under any circumstances. Divorce was not merely discouraged in their household, it was presented as something fundamentally incompatible with true Christian faith. Jim, Bob, and Michelle themselves frequently spoke of marriage as a permanent institution, one that requires constant work, forgiveness, and reliance on God to overcome any obstacle. They presented themselves as living proof that any marriage could survive anything with enough faith and commitment. Now, their own separation directly contradicts everything they taught their children, leaving the younger generation to reconcile the painful reality of their parents' failed marriage with the rigid teachings they received throughout their formative years. The impact on the adult Duggar children is particularly significant, as many of them have built their own marriages and families based on the model their parents provided. For the married Duggar daughters and sons, witnessing their parents' separation forces them to question whether the foundation they were given was ever truly solid. Some may find themselves grappling with feelings of betrayal, wondering if their parents' marriage was always more performance than partnership. Others may experience a crisis of faith, questioning the teachings they were raised with if those teachings could not even sustain their parents' own relationship. The separation also raises practical questions about family gatherings, holidays, and the future of the Duggar family brand. Will the adult children be forced to choose sides between their parents? How will they navigate the complicated dynamics of a family that has always presented itself as perfectly unified? These are questions that will haunt the Duggar family for years to come, reshaping their relationships in ways that are only beginning to unfold. Beyond the immediate family circle, the separation has significant implications for the broader religious and cultural movement that the Duggars came to represent. For decades, Jim, Bob, and Michelle were viewed as icons of the Quiverfull movement, a theology that encourages families to have as many children as God allows and to raise them according to strict biblical principles. They were living proof that the Quiverfull lifestyle was not only sustainable but could also produce happy, successful, and well-adjusted children. Their reality show brought this lifestyle into the mainstream, inspiring countless other families to adopt similar practices and beliefs. The separation of Jim, Bob, and Michelle strikes at the very heart of this movement's credibility. If even the most famous and successful Quiverfull family could not maintain their marriage, what does that say about the sustainability of the lifestyle itself? Critics of the movement have seized upon this development as evidence that the rigid, patriarchal structures promoted by Quiverfull leaders are fundamentally flawed and ultimately destructive. The separation has become a powerful symbol of the failure of a belief system that promised happiness and fulfillment but instead delivered scandal, division, and now marital collapse. The financial implications of this separation are also significant and complex. The Duggar family built a considerable fortune through their reality television show, book deals, speaking engagements, and various business ventures. Jim Bob, in particular, has been described as having substantial real estate holdings and other investments. The division of these assets in a potential divorce settlement would be a complicated and potentially contentious process, involving not just the couple themselves but also the various family businesses and properties that are intertwined with the Duggar brand. The Dillards have previously raised allegations of financial impropriety and control by Jim Bob, suggesting that money has been a source of tension within the family for years. The separation may bring these financial issues to the forefront, potentially leading to legal battles that could further tarnish the family's public image and drain their resources. Moreover, the question of how to support the numerous adult children and grandchildren who have been dependent on the family's financial success adds another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. The emotional and psychological toll of the separation on both Jim Bob and Michelle individually cannot be overstated. After more than 40 years of marriage, they have built their entire identities around each other and their shared mission. To separate at this stage of life is to lose not just a spouse but also a business partner, a public persona, and a significant part of one's own sense of self. Jim Bob, who has always been the dominant figure in the family, must now confront the reality that his leadership and control have not prevented the collapse of his most important relationship. Michelle, who has spent her adult life as a devoted wife and mother, must navigate a world where her primary identity is no longer defined by her partnership with Jim Bob. Both of them face the daunting task of rebuilding their lives and identities in the aftermath of a separation that came after decades of shared history and public expectations. The psychological impact of this separation will likely be felt for years, shaping their remaining years in ways that are impossible to predict. The separation also raises profound questions about the future of the Duggar family legacy. The reality show that brought them fame has long been canceled, and the remaining family members have struggled to maintain relevance in the public eye. Various children have attempted to launch their own spin-off shows, social media careers, and entrepreneurial ventures, but none have achieved the level of success that the family enjoyed in its heyday. The separation of the patriarch and matriarch effectively signals the end of the Duggar family as a cohesive public brand. The carefully maintained image of a unified, faith-filled family has been shattered beyond repair, and there is likely no way to reassemble the pieces into anything resembling what once existed. The Duggar children will have to chart their own paths forward, both individually and collectively, without the unifying presence of their parents' seemingly unbreakable partnership to anchor them. In the broader cultural context, the separation of Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of building a public life on a foundation that cannot withstand scrutiny. Their story illustrates the immense pressure that comes with performing perfection for an audience of millions, and the inevitable collapse that occurs when private reality can no longer be suppressed in favor of public image. It is a reminder that no relationship, no matter how carefully curated or publicly celebrated, is immune to the challenges and struggles that all human beings face. The separation also highlights the destructive consequences of rigid belief systems that leave no room for grace, growth, or the recognition of human fallibility. In the end, the Duggar separation is not just a story about one family's difficulties. It is a reflection of the universal human experience of disappointment, failure, and the painful process of reckoning with the gap between our ideals and our realities.